Happy Saturday to you, everyone. I sincerely hope that you're doing well. Today, I want to talk about a recently published research article. You know, from time to time, these things come out, research articles relating to dogs. Most of them are not research articles that specifically address dog training. Most of them will address some sort of dog physiology and genetics and environment and phenotypic type plasticity, just things like that most people are just going to really delve into. But every now and then an article is published regarding dog training methodologies, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. And man, I'm telling you what, when those come out, those are the ones that just fly through social media. They're everywhere out there. People will take the article that looks something like this right here. Let me hold it up. There you go. And they'll take that darn thing and they'll stamp it with busted on it if you happen to be in one camp or another camp. And that's another problem when it comes to these research articles. You know, Dr. Stephen Spott said that there's really never going to be a pure research, uncontaminated article or experiment relating to dogs because the footprint of human bias contaminates all of them. We all are aware of dogs, and most people really like dogs. The vast majority of people do. And even if you don't have a dog and you don't care about a dog's put in front of your face every time you turn around. And with all the marketing that's out there, a dog equates to being happy, and therefore we want to be happy. So again, it's hard for us, having never been a dog, to relate to the world from a dog's point of view. It's really difficult. And hence we just kind of anthropomorphize. And I've talked before, there's nothing totally wrong with that. It does have some survival value because if you can predict an animal's behavior because you know your human behavior, then that will help you track that animal should you need to. That help you to judge an animal's behavior. And that went back years and years ago, back to hunter-gatherers. Therefore, they can predict an animal's behavior and be able to kill it so they'd have something to eat. So anthropomorphism has gone way back, and it just kind of gains a little bit of steam or just takes on a different form from time to time. Okay, well, I want to talk about a particular article that was actually conducted over about 2 or 3 year period, finished up in October of 2019, and was published in December of 2020. And the problem with this is that most people aren't going to take the time to go through this thing like I do. They're just not. As you can see here, let me pull this thing over. There you go. You see all of my notes, more notes, and I got more notes over here. I got some back here. I got a whole bunch of notes. I got notes everywhere. I got reference books that I use. I have colleagues that I will call on to help me with these research articles. People that are academics that can really discern from these articles what gleaned from it, fact from fiction, and things that confirmational bias always comes to come in. So this particular article just hit the press, and it's out there and it's running hot. And if you were to just read just the title, kind of like going shopping for a book in a bookstore. So many of us pick up a book and we immediately either say, man, I want to read that, or do we dismiss it entirely on its cover? And how many of you have ever read a book that you got into and you went, man, that cover made me think that this was going to be a great book and this thing just stinks. Or on the opposite, you look at it and go, it's kind of boring. But once you get into it, you decide, wow, one of the best books I've ever read. It's incredible. Well, this happens. Why then, some 29-page article, why would it be treated any differently? So therefore, the title of this article is real eye-catching if you train dogs. And the title is, Does Training Methods Matter? Yeah, they do. Evidence for the negative impact of aversive-based methods on companion dog welfare. Okay, if that's all you read, and you didn't bother to go all the way through this and do the comparisons and glean from it and pull out what's relevant, what's not relevant, point out faults in it. In other words, kind of just do a peer review on this. You would take it just based on that title. And unfortunately, that's just what so many people do. And if you own a dog, or you're going to own a dog in the future, then I don't need to tell you that there's really two camps out there when it comes to dog training methodologies. There are those who believe that you need to, from time to time, correct the dog to stop its undesired behavior and to create a reliable response to any command that you give. You need to give them a reason to do so outside of just all positive, meaning treats, pets, and telling the dog how wonderful they are. Okay, then there's a camp that doesn't believe in any of that. And again, I've discussed that before. It doesn't exist really, but they like to pretend that it does. And when they come across an article like this, boom, they'll shove it right in your face. Okay, but I'm not gonna go over this whole thing with you because it's like, again, 29 pages long. So I kind of did a couple notes here. I'm just gonna go over it. I'm just going to do it as factual as possible. I am not going to allow my personal opinions to get involved with this. I'm going straight up fact, and you can decide what you wish. I'll put a link to the article. Go read the whole darn thing. Many of you who are in academics, you can definitely probably do a better job than even I can on some of these areas, but do know I did proof this out for those that are in higher up academics to make sure that what I put on this little piece of paper is true. So here we go. This is going to be the what do you call it in sports, the final 2 minutes, the 2-minute warning. Here we go. Okay, so this article is done to set about saying if there is any truth that aversive training methods can negatively impact the welfare of a dog in the training context and outside of the training context. 92 dogs were recruited from 8 training schools in Portugal. Now, all the studies was done by 2 universities in Portugal, 1 in Italy, and 1 in the United Kingdom. The schools were selected entirely by their geographical proximity to the testing site, not by the experience of the trainers involved, their qualifications, reputations, anything. All they did was look for volunteers. They contacted 8 head trainers from 8 different schools. 7 of them agreed to do the study. They also made sure that in their phone calls that we would have trainers who represent the different methodologies. And so they kind of divided those up into 3 groups. There was a reward-based only training group, and they had 42 dogs participate in their study. There was a low proportion aversive training group known as mixed. They call it the group mixed, more of a balanced approach. And then there was a high proportion aversive training group. I honestly didn't know those existed anymore, but I guess they do. Maybe they do in Portugal. I don't know. But anyway, so they did that. But here's another thing that's the problem. So when they did, they asked the trainers of those training facilities to select dyads, family dyads, to train the dogs. So in other words, the dogs are not trained by professionals in this particular study. They were asked to do 3 training sessions of basic obedience type commands. And these dogs were trained and handled by their owners, not by a professional. So that's a problem just in and of itself. I cannot tell you how many times I stood in front of an owner and said, hey, easy there, easy, not so hard, back off a little bit. Oh, your timing's off. I know it seemed like that was quick, but actually the reward came about 6 seconds after the behavior, and you can tell your dog's a little confused by this whole thing. Same thing with corrections. This is why we're pros. We stand in front of people all the time and make sure that they do what they're supposed to do and do it properly. But no, this study used the owners of the dog, not the pros. The class sizes or the number of dogs eventually through the whole system, through the whole testing thing, was taken down to 79 members. So in other words, there was 92 to start, ended up with 79, and some dropped out for various reasons because the families just couldn't continue with the study, or the dogs are seemed inappropriate for the study. The dogs didn't cooperate with certain parts of the study, and we got down to 79, which when you count how many millions of dogs roam this planet with their owners, it seems like a very small sample size. 79? Just 79. Let's just go pick 79 dogs that happen to live in Portugal. And let's do our studies with them, with 79 families. It seemed like a small sample size. You know, with this pandemic, you see that we know the human body like no tomorrow. We are very, very, very knowledgeable about the human physiology. Yet, look at the sample size for vaccines into tens of thousands of people. You know, anytime you want to really kind of do a real study like this where you're trying to come up with some sort of basis, You just have to have a larger sample size. So I do have a little bit of a fault with the sample size. I do have a fault with the fact that you had non-trainers training their dogs. So this thing goes on, and what they did is they basically had these owners do 3 training sessions with their dogs. And while they were training their dogs, they were videotaped. And the videotapes of the training sessions were shown to the experimenters. And the experimenters would then take a look at behaviors such as paw raising, turning sideways, lying on your side, panting, ear set, just things of that sort to look for what we call stress markers. Is the dog stressed? And so they measured that inside the training context. And then they sent the dogs home with their owners, and they did cortisol samples with saliva by using saliva. And by the way, they also did those right after the training session. So during the training session, they did not take samples to check for cortisol from the saliva of the animals. They did it 20 minutes after the training sessions, and then when the dogs were home on non-training days. Okay, and then they took those measurements. And then they did what's called a cognitive bias test. I'm not even going to mention that because even in their own words, that thing was so tainted that it's a non-factor because too many dogs dropped out of the test. And in those that remained, the results were skewed by factors beyond the experimenter's control. Noise, people, other dogs in the building. There's just a myriad of factors. So I'm just going to discount that and go back to the other 2. Okay, so their 3 training sessions were conducted by the owners, not trainers. And the number of sessions were too little to really allow for predictive information. I cannot tell you how many lessons it takes to start to instill in an animal predictive information. What does that word mean? What does the word sit mean, down mean, heel mean? What does that even mean? And what do you expect? Remember, what is it that you want me to do and why should I do it? 3 sessions? Okay, I may get a dog, lure a dog into a sit using a treat. Simply by biomechanics, just putting this thing over their head and the butt drops to the ground and bingo, they get a treat. Yeah, absolutely. You may get that done, but you're not going to get it done in a reliable sense in which you say, hey, sit. And they do, treat or no treat. That's not going to happen in 3 sessions, not for most dogs anyway. And definitely, I guarantee a great many out of the 79 that was left over. Also, another factor that was involved with this that I think skews any information that they found was that the training sessions were individual or group classes. Oh, good. Okay, there you go. Just tell me that alone, and that makes me want to tear up the whole study. The dynamics in a group class are uniquely different than those with a dog and its owner by themselves. It is uniquely different. I've given Facebook Live videos and talk about going to dog parks. You just walked into the Hunger Games. The social dynamics that happen when you come across and you are introduced to unfamiliar animals and unfamiliar humans in a tight setting, while I'm on leash, so the ability to flee is no longer even available to me. You can't judge a dog's stress from the training and the method used by the training because the context in which the training was done was already, for most animals, very stressful enough. It's stressful enough. So again, that to me just takes it away. So anyway, cortisol samples were taken 20 minutes after training, and they were taken by the owners. All these samples were taken by the owners. There's another little red flag. Okay, how do you know how to take these? Do you really know how to take these properly? Yeah, they said they showed them how, but again, there's a lot more involved. I've done that. I owned a veterinary hospital, and I've done this, and this is a very difficult thing to do and do properly. And how many dogs are going to take a little culture swab and allow you to stick it in their mouth without trying to bite the darn thing, take it out of your hand, or simply refusing it? And by the way, that's what many of these dogs did, so their samples were never even taken. And then it was done at home on non-training days. But here's the problem, and they even admit it. Again, I'm not going through this whole study. I'll send you a link. You can read it yourself. But they admit that there might be a problem with the cortisol sample size. And by the way, cortisol, what is cortisol? Anytime your stress response is mobilized, for whatever reason, remember, it can be mobilized for many reasons. Outside of fear, it can simply be mobilized because you want to do a bunch of push-ups. You want to work out today. You want to go for a run. You're getting ready to do a marathon. Your stress response is there to help give you an extra boost of energy during times in which the lion needs to catch a zebra and the zebra needs to get away from the lion. There are many reasons why our stress response is there. And anytime it does, it's going to leave a telltale trace of cortisol, which is part of the glucose. It's a corticosteroid that's released into the body, and then along comes glucocorticoids and so on and so forth. So you measure this because it is believed that an elevated cortisol is an indicator of stress. At least that's what they were going on in this study. However, it can also be a rat running on a wheel. And there have been studies, many studies done with rodents that are not so biased because people just don't have the same emotional feelings about a rat. And that's why a lot of those studies with rats prove to be very, very good. They're very enlightening, and we studied them, but when it comes to a dog, we all have bias. And there you go. But anyway, they've done studies with rats running on the wheel. And when the rat ran on the wheel, cortisol levels were high. Yeah, man, I'm running, I'm exercising. But then, that was the rat running on the wheel voluntarily. But then they made the rat run on the wheel. They forced the rat onto a wheel that it couldn't get off and made the darn thing move. And then all of a sudden, cortisol level went up again. So the findings are, again, that's how we found out how the cortisol level actually goes up when you're exercising, whether you want to or if you want to. But then if you're made to do it, it goes up, and sometimes it goes just a little bit higher because now you're stressed. I don't want to do it. It's like someone making you work out. So these were done at home, and the other thing that Tane said at home is that they had to take into account the other factors that can cause stress. There were children involved. Children can stress a dog. Believe it or not, they really, really can. Other dogs in the family. What do we know about the dynamics? Nothing was talked about the dynamics of the other dogs in the family. Some dogs, as soon as they walk into their house, it's like putting them in a zoo with a tiger. Yeah, so again, that's going to affect the cortisol. What about the entire living environment? Is that a family that gets along, or is it a family that fights all the time? Or is it a family that is loud, disruptive? Do you have a lot of people visiting your home? In other words, there's a lot of stinking things that can happen on a non-training day to include construction to your home, a remodel in your kitchen, something happening outdoors. Oh, good Lord. Really? Okay, so that bothers me on this. And so throw that out. That's done. Let's just get rid of that all the way. Okay. They consider panting as a stress indicator during their training sessions. Yes, it can be. It certainly can be. When people bring a dog to me to evaluate, to determine if this dog may possibly be suffering from a psychiatric disorder, one of the first things that I do is I start counting respirations. I look for, do we have closed mouth breathing? Are we panting? And then but I also have to take into account, you're in a novel environment, you're seeking out the rules of prediction and control. I also have to take into account the temperature, the ambient temperature of that room outside, and what was it like riding in the car. I have to give the animal time to decay in case riding the car was stressful. So many factors have to be taken in. And panting can also be the direct result of a dog's physical condition. Yeah, absolutely. So if I make you climb up some of the mountains that I climb at my mountain home, and you haven't been working out, you're carrying around a little bit of extra COVID, you're carrying around the COVID-19 pounds, you might be panting by the time you get to the top of some of these mountains. Okay, so again, a lot of it has to do with conditioning. We've had dogs that we train that do a board and train program, and I remember a large Rottweiler, I won't name him, but I'm telling you what, he was a big boy, big like in round big, and he was throwing a lot of shade. And that being said, our training sessions were no more than about 5 to 6 minutes per. So there's multiple ones during the day because after 6 minutes, he was done. It was over. You had reached a point of diminishing returns. He was panting. He was just, no. Now the stress level's too high. Again, when your stress response comes up, stress is okay as long as it only goes to a certain level. We were given that. We were given that to survive. It's okay to have stress. That's why we were given the biology to overcome it. Otherwise, if we weren't supposed to have stress, no stress at all in our lives, we would not have been given the biology to create decay. We probably wouldn't even have a parasympathetic nervous system in our bodies. But because the fact that nature knew we would be stressed from time to time, sometimes a whole bunch, sometimes just a wee bit, sometimes very often, sometimes you go a long time and you're not stressed. Either way, you were given the biology to overcome stress. The stress you were not given the biology to overcome is pathological stress. Day in, day out, meaning you don't have time to decay back to your baseline because about the time you're halfway there, another provocative event, another provocative stimulus is right in your grill. And here you go again. And we humans are horrible at it because we can mobilize our stress response from a mere thought. And that's something an animal can't do. So again, here we go. Panting because done for a lot of reasons. Granted, yeah, if you stress a dog out and train, they're going to pant. You take a dog somewhere they're not used to being, they're going to pant. They will be stressed, granted. But you just can't take it in its entirety. Okay, then other indicators such as yawning, paw raised, licking, etc. were considered to be stressful. By the time this survey was done or this experiment was done, they discounted those because they admitted, they said, uncle, there's many things that can cause that. many things. And so therefore, we just can't plug it straight into the training sessions. Okay, and then finally, let me just kind of read you the conclusion of the test. Okay, here we go. Remember I said there were 3 groups that were tested. Rewards only, that's it, all positive. Rewards only. In fact, the only thing that was allowed to be used by them and the only thing that they did use to try and create any sort of reliability in the dog was the use of what's known as a negative punishment. And that meaning you take away from the environment. You take away from. So they used what's called a quitting signal. A quitting signal. And the quitting signals have shown, other research articles have suggested that quitting signals can actually cause an animal to become more stressed than if you simply just made it stop doing something. And the reason being is frustration. Frustration. Let me give you an example. You have a child, let's say maybe he's 4, and he's playing a little video game. And you say, now, okay, your time's up. You got allotted 20 minutes a day, and it's now right at 20 minutes, and I'm going to take that from you. How many children you know will pitch a never-loving fit? Absolutely. They don't get the 20-minute thing just yet. Their little heads just don't wrap around that. They don't get that. And then if they're even younger, you follow up and say, okay, not only am I taking this from you, enough's enough, no more video playing, but because of your behavior, you're not going to get it tomorrow. Okay, how many are they going to do that? In other words, when it comes to quitting signals, if you use it with an animal, they have to first of all understand that the behavior created the end of the pleasant thing, the pleasant experience, or the withdrawal of treats, or the sudden taking away of a toy. They have to associate with what they just did with that effect, with that end result. They have to put those two together. And then if that were not enough, you now have to suppose that the animal will be able to deduce that behavior, if I do it again in the future, will end up with the exact same results. Well, again, that's not happening in 3 training sessions for any dog. Some dogs will go their entire lifetime. But what it can do is create a tremendous amount of frustration from the dog. You've seen Captain, he loves his ball. He loves it. But I don't just take the ball ever after I get it out, throw it one time, he comes back, I grab it, shove it in my backpack, and off we go. I don't do that because when I've done that, just to check this quitting signal thing, he was incredibly stressed. Panting, whining, pacing around, you could feel his frustration. You really could. It took him a long time to decay. Versus when I go, no, let go, out, that's good. All right, heel. We do something like that. And he's over it. Okay, we're done. And we're moving on down the road. So let me kind of get back to this. Remember, there were 3 groups, reward-based only. Then there was this mixed group that they use some aversive methods in their training, and they followed up with rewards. So more of what we call a balanced approach. And then apparently there's this group that was super heavy-handed. In other words, 79% of their interactions with the dog was something aversive, something hard on the animal. So just based on that alone, what would you think the conclusion of this study was? Just based on that information alone. I'll give you a second. All right, you know where I'm coming with this. Let's go back to my same child. Let's make him a little bit older, maybe 6, playing a video game. You walk in the room and say, hey, I know you're enjoying that game. You're having a lot of fun. I know you're probably at your personal best and with a few more points. However, it's time to put the game up and now go do math. If you were like me as a kid and you hated math, couldn't stand it. Actually, I was kind of good at it until they added the alphabet, and then it went downhill from there. But nevertheless, you make me come in from outdoors in Alaska when I was a child. You make me put away, Call of the Wild by Jack London or any of these other books that I grew up with, and make me go do math. I'm stressed. And anytime I took exams that had math in it, I was stressed. Real stressed. Same thing. Okay? So you know where this thing's going. All right, so the dogs who were given rewards only, no aversive stimuli whatsoever, they showed less stress. No Sherlock. The dogs who were heavy-handed, aversive-based only, top 79% of their interactions are aversive-based, showed the most stress. Okay. And the mixed group, I don't know. They showed the same amount of stress as the reward-based, or just a little bit more, because they were actually made to do something. They're made to do it. I'm sorry. I'm not going to give you a treat for that. No, I'll give you one for this, but not for that. And you actually kind of have to do it. Yes, because I'm trying to create this thing called reliability. I know in life you'll be tempted by many things. But again, by their owners giving them the aversive, but even the owners, as unskilled as they were, some may have been very skilled, I don't know, but possibly as unskilled as they were able to create a situation. You can read, and again, I'm going to put a link in here, that you'll see that the numbers were very close to each other in the reward-based only and in the mix, meaning being balanced, being there. Common sense, good old reasonable common sense. Okay, so here's what they said. Straight from the report. There you go. Okay. Moreover, whereas different proportions of aversive-based methods did not result in differences in dog welfare outside the training context, because it had its own context that was completely uniquely different than the training context, among aversive-based schools, a higher proportion of aversive-based methods resulted in poor welfare during training. Really? Imagine that. Okay, and then the other thing. Aversive-based methods proved to be more effective. If they prove to be more effective in achieving training goals, the recommendation may be to use aversive stimuli as infrequently as possible during training and use them in a combination with reward-based techniques. No kidding. So what dog owner would ever think that just corrections alone is what you do? Who would never think and never have the joy of owning a dog, never want to own a dog, and have the joy of wanting to give a treat? You know, I'm just going to tell you something right here and now, with everything in my heart. This profession, I've been in longer than I think anyone that I know. At the grassroots level, at a high scientific level, at an academic type level, I've been in it. And it can be a very tough industry. I just talked to a young lady yesterday that wants to become a professional dog trainer. My first 15 minutes were trying to talk her out of it. It can be very difficult, especially on social media. You guys have read some of the comments on some of my posts. People want to use me like a rat using a wooden block. It can be very difficult. But that being said, I stay in this because I've been in it long enough to see the results. I've seen and I know of thousands of dogs that have been saved because their behaviors were made to be reliable. So aversive type stuff, or just get rid of the scientific words, meaning, hey, I love you, dog, but you have to do it. You don't understand, maybe you don't get it right now, but you will. Type attitude, same that we should have with our children, same thing that we should have with our society that we seem to be losing the grip of, and I won't talk about that because I'll be on this thing for 3 hours. Yeah, it's common sense. Common sense, but you do this because you love dogs. And I swear, if I could train a dog through full maturity that would reliably respond to every command I gave, under every conditions that I would encounter in the course of my lifetime with my dog, a high probability of encountering that condition. If I could do that with just treats alone, or just ignoring a behavior, or just using a quitting signal, I do it. That's fun, man. That's fun. It really, truly is. It's just not real. It isn't. Kira and I don't know if we're going to do it this afternoon or if we're going to do it tomorrow, but we have a new puppy in our household. I've been telling you about this puppy for a while. Well, she arrived. Can you tell by the lack of, do I have black rings underneath my eyes from the lack of sleep? Yeah, anyway. So this little puppy chomped on my foot last night. Yeah, I didn't have any shoes on or socks. No, I'm one of these people that I get comfortable. I've been wearing shoes all day long. My feet just want air. And she went, chomp. And I immediately looked over to Karen and I said, okay, I'm going to try this ignoring thing. And I'm going, those are sharp little teeth. And she chomped again. And I just ignored it. I did not interact in any sort of way. I took one for the team. I did. I promise you I did. She chomped again. Okay, I had enough. And finally he was like, no, out. Guess what? She didn't chomp on my foot again. And guess what we did? We ended up playing with a little stuffed toy and whatever. Oh, and by the way, I missed a little part of that story. So while she chomped the second time, I did, as some people will suggest, I offered her something else. A little squirrel toy that we have, a little squeaker thing in it. No. So then I offered a treat. No. My toes were obviously the treat of the moment, flavor of the month, whatever have you. So it was only me applying a little bit of a verse. Hey, no, knock it off, that hurts. Made it go away. And you're serious, she's fine. And if you want any lasting proof, by the way, when it comes to some of these studies that put out stuff like this, that study was worthless. It's absolutely worthless. It doesn't mean anything other than what you already knew, common sense. Don't be so heavy-handed when you train. Try to have a balanced approach, and it's going to be good. But if you need anything to hang your hat on that's solid, go back and watch all the videos that I've had Captain in my videos, every one of them. Go watch them. Watch his attitude around me. Watch his immediate and reliable response to every command that I give. Look how our relationship is. Really look at it. Feel his joy. Feel his love for me and mine for his. And know this, I used a balanced approach. Captain has been corrected. Captain will probably continue to be corrected from time to time. He'll have to be, as I introduce him to new things. Yeah, he's been corrected. Slip collar, never used a prong collar. Did use a remote training collar to create that dynamic off-leash response so I can hike in the mountains and I never have to worry about a darn thing. Captain's right there by me. I call him, he comes. No big deal. Just used it properly. Just touch. That's all it is, a little haptic signal. It's just electronic. But again, people want to make a big deal out of it because they're not educated in their use. They're not educated in science because they don't bother to read the whole darn study. They only read the title. Okay, so that's enough of that. That gets you Saturday going, won't it? All right, so tomorrow we're going to move on. I'm going to talk about old school. A lot of times you also hear, I just kind of want to hang on this study stuff here for a little while, methodologies for just a few days, if you'll indulge me on it. A lot of people will say, oh, Brian, you're this or that, or you're old school, you're old school. You know me, keep a simple, stupid rule. If it ain't broke, don't go breaking it. So I want to talk a little bit about that tomorrow. And then we'll move on to some exciting stuff there as we start to move along towards the end of 365. All right, guys, I don't know if my audio worked today or not. And I appreciate, by the way, the suggestions that people have made about fixing the audio situation. But I'm too far along to switch off of the Facebook Live broadcast. I'm just going to try and sit closer to the microphone and maybe make the conditions around me where you can hear me. Just my phone microphone is working. It's too late to change up the game. If I was only 100 videos, 100 days into this, I would have. But 341, now headed to 342 out of 365. Nope. I'm like an old dog. You can't go changing something new on me, teaching me a new trick. I'm going to stick with what I have till we get to the end. All right, guys, enjoy the rest of your day. I will drop a link to this study. Please go read it yourself and come up with it. And then, there's tons of other ones out there that are just, I think, far more important. Ones that relate to a dog and how they associate with fear and what can cause fear, genetic basis behind fear, decay factors involved, mirroring their owner's stress response, how they're able to hijack the neuropeptides in your brain, so on and so forth. There's many, many, many research articles that I believe just are far more important and really do provide those aha moments where you go, wow, I didn't know that. Dang. Kind of like me with the baby thing yesterday. I had no clue that a baby could move that fast. I knew a toddler could. I didn't know a baby could crawl that fast. It's okay. That was an aha moment for me. And hopefully I can provide you with more and more studies that give you that aha moment and help you go, now I get it. Because again, at the end of the day, we have to understand the basis behind behavior before we start setting about trying to adjust that behavior, modify it in any sort of way. And therefore, those are the studies that I hang my hat on. All right, guys, out of here, done. See you later. Enjoy the rest of your day. I'll check with you tomorrow. And stay tuned. I don't know if we're going to do it today or if we're going to do it tomorrow. I'm leaving it up to Kara about introducing our little puppy. By the way, her name is Castell, and she's a solid black 10-week-old German Shepherd puppy. And she's full of herself. All right, I like dogs like that. Give me a challenge. Take care, guys.